Chapter 5 covers ethical issues in research. This chapter discusses the ethical issues. One's personal and professional reputation rests in the ethical standards demonstrated in the completion of the scientific process. As a graduate student, you will encounter a number of ethical issues in research and scholarship. We will have to keep two things in mind: cheating is wrong, misconduct is not worth the risk. This chapter we will cover misconduct in science, working with faculty and other graduate students, and using humans and animals as subjects in research. According to the White House, scientific misconduct is fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in proposing, performing, or reviewing research, or in reporting research results. Federal Register. October 14, 1999. The issue of scientific misconduct has also been addressed in the American Psychological Association Publishing Manual. In this section we discuss issues in scientific misconduct that are generally pertinent to all scholarly areas of physical activity. There are 7 areas of scientific dishonesty. The first area is plagiarism. Plagiarism means using the ideas, writings, or drawings of others as your own. This is completely unacceptable in the research process. According to the manual, researchers do not present substantial portions or elements of another's work or data as their own, even if the other work or data source is cited occasionally. An author presents the work of another as if it were his or her own work. In the following cases: use of exact words, failure to give credit to a source of information, and failure to give credit for an idea. When you're in doubt, please make sure to use a citation. 2. Fabrication and falsification refer to make up or alter research data. This is completely unethical, and severe penalties are imposed on individuals who are caught. Falsification can also occur with cited literature. Graduate students should be careful how they interpret what an author says. Work of other authors should not be bent to fit projected hypotheses. 3. Non-publication of data. Some data are not included because they do not support a desired outcome. Sometimes it is called cooking data. There is a very thin line between eliminating bad data and cooking data. Sometimes there will be outliers issue with your data. Trimming them is a poor practice. 4. Faulty data gathering procedures. A number of unethical activities can occur at the data gathering stage. 1. Continuing with data collection from PA who are not meeting the requirement of the research. For example, poor effort, failure to adhere to agreements about diet, exercise, rest. 2. Malfunctioning equipment. 3. Inappropriate treatment of participants. 4. Recording data incorrectly. 5. Poor data storage and retention. Data must be stored and maintained as originally recorded and not altered. All original records should be maintained so that the original data are available for examination. Most journals suggest that original data should be maintained for at least 3 years following publication of the results. A major ethical issue among researchers involves joint research projects, the publication and presentation of joint research efforts. Generally, the order of authorship for presentation and publication should be based on the researcher's contributions to the project. The first author is usually the researcher, who developed the idea and the plan for the research. Decide the order of authors at the beginning of a collaborative effort. This saves hard feelings later, when everyone may not agree on whose contribution was most important. 2 rules should help define authorship. 1. Technicians do not necessarily become joint authors. 2. Authorship should involve only those who contribute directly to the specific research project. This does not necessarily include the lab director or a graduate student's major professor. However, unacceptable publication practices include below issues. Major professor on theses and dissertations only. 2nd, authorship is acceptable for the dissertation supervisor. Dual publication. Having the same scientific paper published in more than one journal or other publication is generally unethical. Multiple publications from the same database. Generally good scientific practices to publish all the appropriate data in a single primary publication. In some cases, the volume of data may be so large as to prohibit an inclusive paper. Sometimes the papers can be published as a series, and other times they may be completely separate. Another example is a large-scale study in which a tremendous amount of information is collected. However, the authors should identify that more than one paper has been produced from these data. Graduate students should be aware of the copyright regulations and the concept of fair use as it applies to educational materials. The concept of fair use has 4 basic rules. Purpose: is the use to be commercial or educational? If it is for the theses or dissertations, then it is okay. Nature: is copying expected or not? Copy a journal article for personal use, it is okay. Copy a whole book, then it is not okay. Amount: how much is to be copied? The significant issue is how important the copies part is. Effect: how does copying affect the market for the document? Copying journal article is okay, but copying book is not okay. There are differences between scientific misconduct and mistakes, and will cause different consequences. Intention is often used as the basis for differentiating between scientific misconduct and mistakes. As the textbook states on page 85, sanctions for scientific misconduct of researchers may include university sanctions, restriction of academic duties, termination of work on the project, reduction in professorial rank, fines to cover costs, separation from the university, salary freeze, promotion freeze, supervision of future grant submissions, verbal reprimands, letter of reprimand, monitoring research with prior review of publications, revocation of prior publications, letters to offended parties, prohibition of obtaining outside grants, discontinuance of service to outside agencies, release of information to agencies and professional organizations, referral to legal system for further actions, fines to cover costs. They will also have sanctions from funding agencies, journals, or professional groups include, but are not limited to, revocation of prior publications, letters to offended parties, prohibition of obtaining outside grants, discontinuance of service to outside agencies, release of information to agencies and orgs, referral to legal system, fines. For graduate students, plagiarism may result in A0 for the assignment, and F for the course, expulsion from the program and university, and revocation of the student's degree. As a student, you do not want any of these sanctions to happen, so it is vital that you understand how not to plagiarize. One way to help ensure this is through proper writing and citations. Most research in the study of physical activity deals with humans, often children. Therefore, the researcher must be concerned about any circumstances in the research setting or activity that could harm the participants. Harm should be interpreted to mean to frighten, embarrass, or negatively affect the subjects. When protecting human participants, what should human research participants expect? They will have the following rights: right to privacy or non-participation, right to remain anonymous, right to confidentiality, right to experimenter responsibility. Consideration must be given to the protection of human participants. The researcher is required to protect the rights and well-being of participants in his or her study. Below are the elements of informed consent from Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sports. A fair explanation of the procedures to be followed, including identification of those that are experimental, a description of the attendant discomforts and risks, a description of the benefits to be expected, a disclosure of appropriate alternative procedures that would be advantageous for the participant, an offer to answer any inquiries concerning the procedures, an instruction that the participant is free to withdraw at any time. You might compare this to University of Minnesota requirements. In essence, they are basically the same.